Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today, of course, I get to be joined by Mike Shaug. Michael Shaug is the
Good
founder.
morning.
Good morning. And he is the CEO at Premier Online Marketing. And as you guys know, when you come here to listen to somebody tell you what's what with digital marketing, Mike has so many years of experience across a lot of different platforms and verticals, and so it's always a pleasure to get you to share with the audience, Mike. Today, we're going to talk about something that I think is timely because this episode's being recorded in October, and we're talking about what's coming up real soon in the rest of the year, and that's the holidays. Digital marketing gets kind of interesting when it comes to seasonality and holidays, specifically within the automotive and multifamily verticals. So we're going to jump into that. And the first place I want to start with you is really big picture, Mike. How do you think about, this is a big topic, budgeting when it comes to seasonality across the year for the automotive vertical?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that's really important and for auto is that you recognize that there is a seasonal component to your business. Typically, the high sale time of year begins right after tax season and ends at the end of summer. And then it kind of dies down a little bit until Black Friday. And then it picks up usually pretty strong through the end of the year because there's a lot of great OEM specials and incentives. But that tends to be the time when you are going to sell the most cars at the lowest cost per sale. So obviously, every dealership that we work with is going to be marketing all year long because they always have stuff to sell. But there are timeframes when where it's better and easier to sell. Obviously, the holiday season being an incredible opportunity for everyone in the auto or power sports field. So definitely, we recommend budget flighting for sure for all of our clients, really to kind of peak throughout the summer months and then spike up again in from basically a couple weeks before Black Friday to the end of December to support those specials and kind of last minute buyers and people that need to make business expenditures on the automotive side, or conversely on the housing side, people that are looking to move before they start a job at the end of the year. So there's definitely a lot of seasonality in all the industries we work with. They're somewhat similar, a little different. But yeah, it's definitely really important to look at the whole year, especially for this next year that's coming up, and just kind of realize, like, when am I most likely to sell most of my units? Do I have a flat budget for the whole year where I'm spending exactly the same amount of money in February as I am in July or November? If that's the case, then you need to revise that and increase during those times when you have way more people in market that are shopping for what you're selling. And the expectation there is that if you are kind of spending in more peak seasonality, you're going to have a lower cost per lead. You're going to have a lower cost per sale, i.e. a more profitable transaction, and you'll move more, much more inventory as a result.
I mean, is it still true that, especially the winter holiday season, that, costs, when you're thinking about budgeting, the cost can easily spike because of how like in the automotive vertical, there are 3 tiers, like they're at the OEM level, and then you've got your regional level, and then the dealers themselves at tier 3. It was certainly in the past when the tier 1 level at the manufacturer spends so heavily that it has an effect on how everyone else might be bidding for similar keywords or identical keywords. Is that still a significant factor?
Definitely still a significant factor. I mean, OEMs spend so much in every single state in support of their dealerships, and it definitely has an increase on CPC. But the trade-off is that volume usually spikes up by about 20%. So if you have a good CPC manager managing things, then they can manually control some of those aspects. You shouldn't necessarily just accept that, oh, my cost per click was $4 and I'm totally okay with it being $7 for 2 months and then it's going to come down. It's very hard to do that with your accounts anyway. So you just really want to kind of, as much as possible, maintain the same CPC target for the whole year, with the understanding that you're just going to have to be more vigilant in times when a lot of people are bidding heavier. Obviously, things like PMAX and automated bidding are kind of have an escalatory effect where everyone increases their bids at the same time, and that creates kind of more pressure on that from a bid standpoint. So that's why you just have to really watch everything. You've got to look at the keywords that really make sense. There are a lot of times keywords that our clients overspend on keywords that are too top of funnel during a time of year where the market is more close to the bottom of funnel. So you shouldn't be bidding as aggressively on Ford dealership near me. You should be focusing a lot more on the Ford F-150 Lightning or whatever this outgoing year's model or next year's upcoming model. That's where you really want to be focused, because that's where everyone is looking. They're looking to buy a unit, a car, a truck, a van, and everyone knows that from an OEM incentive standpoint, this is a great time to capture some of those things, especially for, obviously we're in 2025 now. So 2025 models are outgoing and the new ones are 2026. So usually there can be really great incentives against the 2025 year models. And that is where you really should be pushing the vast majority of your focus.
Yeah, I think sometimes that dealers, when they get in the weeds with all of the technical aspects that have been inserted into their businesses, especially in the digital era. And when I think about seasonality, and the reason why I wanted to ask that kind of follow up around budgeting and that time of year is because, and you said it isn't just that, hey, you need to know that some of these costs will rise. That's a normal thing and happens every year. There's also a lot more traffic. There's a lot more, there's this surge of interest for a handful of these reasons that you're talking about. You get some really good model end year incentives and specials on dealers wanting to move those older units. So it's a balance, and I think that's one of the reasons why I always try to tell people to pay very, very close attention to how you share in detail, because you're very open. You have kind of a disposition of abundance in sharing information, and for a dealer, it's really important for them to realize that you need to be working with people that are truth tellers like you are. I think that's really important, because it's one thing to understand the semantics of how your campaign is set up. It's kind of another discipline to understand how the budgeting goes, especially through these kind of seasonal moments. So let me move on to how far in advance. This is a question I think a lot of dealers, a lot of probably people in multifamily and other verticals as well think about. The holiday season. Okay, well, we're having this episode in October. People will be seeing content like this late October, early November. How far in advance should a business be planning and kind of building for these seasonal campaigns?
Definitely, from an automotive standpoint, you should start right away at the beginning of October. There's kind of two different aspects that you want to think through. One is what do we have on the lot that's not moving? What kind of dealership or manager incentives and specials are we going to be pushing irrespective of the OEM? Because the OEM incentives usually, unfortunately, for the holiday season get released around the 4th or 5th of the month, depending on what OEM you have a dealership with. But you want to know kind of what your dealership game plan is for that and start doing pre-marketing, potentially building lists of people that are interested or want to get like a dealership special or something like that. Really, people's shopping activity is pretty dormant throughout October. In auto, it's just a slower month. It's not the worst month. I would say that's probably February, for the most part. But it's definitely one of the bottom probably 4 of the year. So you want to kind of look at how can I concentrate more spend into the second half of November? And it depends on the OEM again. Sometimes the OEM will just release the specials for the end of year. And that's really nice because you get what's happening in November and December at the beginning of the month. If you don't have that situation, you just have to understand that your creative team, your targeting team is going to have to be ready to go with whatever hits the ground at the beginning of December. But in terms of like preparation, you want to start now. You want to start in the middle of October and start getting things going. You want to start thinking through like, what are your events? Because a lot of dealerships have events, parties, charities. Start using that as a marketing tool, because regardless of what the OEMs come out with, you're already going to be doing that. So that tends to be a good place for dealers to lead. And then when you kind of get closer to that Thanksgiving timeframe for auto, that's where you really want to start going aggressively bidding and spending more money behind your top units that you're trying to sell, or the units you're having a harder time selling, and really get that momentum built up a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving, with the understanding that a lot of these people are going to be coming in around that Thanksgiving week, Black Friday, and then you're going to see a pretty powerful escalation of business through the end of the year. So it's very hard to change things on like December 10th. I mean, because when you think about the consideration window for auto, like people that are buying at the end of December probably have made their decision by about the 15th. So you really have, when you think about the marketing for the holiday season, it's really November 10th to December 15th to 18th. That's when you should be concentrating a lot of spend. Obviously, you should still continue to spend through the end of the year because there will continue to be a lot of demand. But a lot of that research and cross comparing and shopping is done typically in advance. Usually, anyone who's looking for a car is usually comparing at least 2 different OEMs and a couple of different models each. So it makes it very important to like think about that and be like, okay, well, I have a bunch of, Silverados. What are kind of the competitor models? Think about that from an SEO perspective. How can I gain traffic for comparison type keywords or searches? Maybe start bidding for them, I don't know, Silverado versus Sierra or something like that. Just to kind of start capturing those people that are really clearly in the prospecting and shopping stage for specific models that you're selling.
I also think that there's probably an area where a lot of dealers will make mistakes when it comes to what's going on at this kind of seasonal time. It does, as you're so brilliantly outlining, there are these kind of specific details and a nuance that is specific to this time of year where it opens the door for mistakes to be made. Where are some of those things, or what are some of the more common ones that you see that dealers will make during that time of year around holiday campaigns?
I hate to say this, but it happens so often. It's the dumbest mistake that a lot of people make, typically because auto dealers have so many different ad sets or ad groups and ads active. Usually the biggest mistake that people make is running a holiday promo through Q1. Because that happens all the time. I've even seen it happen on like model pages where they're doing like a specific model page for like a, HRV or Toyota Tacoma or something, but it's got like the holiday snow and Christmas lights and stuff. So it's really making sure that you're ending it, I think, at the appropriate time is the most important thing, because that's the biggest mistake. And it's probably a third of audits. I'll like look at keywords, and usually they get paused at some point because a dealer will yell at someone, but we'll look and we'll see that there'll be like holiday incentive campaigns running through March or something like that. So that's definitely the biggest one. But kind of in the season, the biggest mistake that you can make is overpaying for traffic. So you just want to make sure that you're being very mindful of kind of what your seasonality is. Look at what happened last year. How much bid escalation was there from October leading into November and December? And you should try to mirror that and control for that as much as possible, because there's a ton of traffic. Every dealership could probably spend close to $50,000 a month just in search if they wanted to grab a lot of market share, and you could do so fairly intelligently without hitting a diminishing return, especially if you're in a large city. If you're in a small city, it will be much lower than that. But you want to make sure that you're not just focused on the amount that is being spent in total. You want to make sure that you're looking at what am I paying in cost per click. The other thing too, a huge mistake that's made is that holiday incentives do not hit fast enough. It's very common that we will get dealerships sending us things around the 10th of December. And really, they have 5 days left for those to be really the most actionable and valuable for them. So I think having templatized creative where you're going to be like, we don't know what the months or percentage of finance benefit or the payment is going to be, but we're going to have the creatives running so we can just plug in those numbers and get them out immediately as soon as we have that information. So kind of being creative ready is super important. And then finally, it's looking at the areas where you sell the most cars. Where are those zip codes? Where are those neighborhoods? And make sure that even though you have a kind of a surge in interest over the holidays, that you are still maximizing your exposure in the areas where you're the most likely to sell cars. So those are kind of the big areas that I look at when I'm thinking about seasonal marketing. And the biggest mistake is obviously running a holiday incentive till July, which I have seen a number of times. But usually your question was like really what is kind of in season, and those are the things that I think of.
Yeah, I'll tell you that number one mistake that you brought up. I still see that all the time. Last year, I want to say, well, earlier this year, technically, it was in April that I was looking through some Honda and Acura dealer websites. I forget why. I had some reason to be looking at as many as I could in a short period of time, and I don't know. I don't know that I looked at more than 20 across the country, and 4 of them had some sort of on their homepage, like giving it
Yeah.
real
Oh
estate.
my
Hey, don't
God.
forget about our holiday savings, like big. So it can be tied into what you're doing, say, for you dealers out there. It's very much an issue of campaigns that could be running, which is costing you money, but it also could be costing you money if it's something that you're promoting on your website or your other properties across the web. Yeah, so that's it's amazing that is still such an issue. You'd think there'd be somebody, hey, make sure you go turn on all the Christmas lights, and then make sure to
Turn
turn
them
off
off.
all the Christmas lights when it's
Yeah.
not Christmas anymore. Well, another thing about the holidays and about seasonal advertising is budget, and we've talked a little bit about this already. But how do you? I think dealers would appreciate, like, what would you recommend, or what's your typical approach to allocation around budget? Because you even dropped a couple numbers where if you're in a big market, yeah, you could spend 50 grand and
Yeah.
it could be very advantageous to you. If you're a smaller market, a smaller number. But there's probably some other thoughts that go into allocation of budget around this time of year, if you wouldn't mind sharing about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously it's you're going to be balancing a lot of needs and requirements from the business standpoint. A lot of people want to kind of power spend down at the end of the year. I would say that whatever you spend in July is probably what you need to spend at least between the day of November 10th to like December 15th. And you just need to understand that your month is not going to be in kind of that November, December. It's that interest is really going to be staggered across the 2 months. So really having that surge during that period, and then potentially having budget kind of taper down for the last 5 days or so of December is really important. But you definitely don't want to look at December like from a budgetary standpoint, like you would a month like February, where there's just a lot less search volume. So you don't want to overpay for less users. You also don't want to underinvest when there are more users, assuming that you're just going to pick them up through radio or SEO or these other places. There's a lot of places for people to buy cars. Google is throwing us SEO curveballs every single day. And that just makes it it obviously benefits them in the respect that the more volatility that you have with SEO, like we're frankly seeing now across in so many different places, it really forces people into the ads platform. So if you really need to make it happen at the end of the year, like every single business does, you definitely don't want to underinvest. You don't want to overpay for traffic. That's the balance, because you still can get great traffic, at a low cost because there is more of it. You just have to be intelligent about how you do it.
Mm-hmm. And there's also something to be said for when that holiday rush is over. That I'm sure you probably have at least a couple recommendations on extending the value and the focus of that seasonal traffic. What are your thoughts there when the rush kind of goes away? What do you recommend in terms of like, hey, keeping momentum and how to kind of balance that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely pivot back to kind of your standard messaging and ads and kind of know what that is going to be before the end of the year. I think that's really important. Um, Messaging. And then obviously, in January, there's substantially less search volume than there is in December. So budgets can probably come down as well. They should for many businesses. So you again, because like you will hit a point of diminishing return, and that's different for every dealer in every market. But you just want to be mindful of the fact that, a lot of times, marketers are away during the holidays. Everyone kind of pieces out around the 18th. So you want to make sure that whoever you're working with has the budget approved for the next month while people are out. And so nobody's like waiting for someone that's on vacation. So I think that's a really important factor as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, let's transition over to multifamily.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and multifamily is really interesting because it definitely has a very sharp seasonality. And that seasonality has been kind of messed with over the last few years with COVID and then inventory oversupply and then interest rates. There's just been a lot of volatility in that sector. And typically the way the general seasonality ramps up can be somewhat similar to auto. It tends to start spiking up in April, hits its all-time high for the year in July, and kind of starts tapering down in September through mid-October, really dies down throughout most of November, and then picks up again a little bit end of November through December, and then drops down around the 15th of July. For kind of that January. So January, February tend to be way slower. So you don't want to have a flat budget in place. You want to make sure that you're increasing your spend and decreasing it based on the seasonality when you are more likely to get more residents at a lower cost because there are more of them. What we see happening a lot is that people will have a flat budget from July through the end of the year, and the cost per lease in those months vary massively. So I obviously want to spend more when my cost per lease is lower. And some of that is, it's really just driven on the school calendar, people moving for jobs, and you're not going to really change that seasonality. So you definitely want to make sure that you're spending more through the high leasing season for really May through middle of September, and then taper back and then spike back up through the end of the year, because that's going to be the best way for you to fill your building at the lowest cost per lease possible.
Talk a little bit about, and is there a comparison around that? How far in advance, if you're in multifamily and you're leasing apartments, and is there a similarity there as well in the seasonality of how far in advance they should be thinking, hey, we need to be tuning up the campaigns?
The benefit there is that there are no OEMs in the multifamily industry. So property owners can run incentives whenever they want. You want to think about what is your move-in incentive for the end of the year. And a lot of apartment communities have pretty aggressive ones right now for a 12-month lease. Some buildings are giving 2 months away in free rent. So you just need to have a very good idea of what the concessions are going to be and run them as it makes sense. But it's not like a situation where a home builders association tells everyone what their APR is going to be for the next 25 days. So fortunately, multifamily doesn't have that challenge. But you definitely don't want to be too late in the game with the incentives. And incentives are super helpful during this time of year specifically. So you definitely want to be thinking about that. You don't probably need as big of a ramp up as you would for an auto dealer, but you definitely want to start thinking about like, what are the specials? What are the events? Because every apartment community has a lot of events. Obviously, you have Veterans Day, you have Thanksgiving, you've got Black Friday. So there are a lot of opportunities to create those events and start marketing for them in advance, big open houses and all of that. That's a great time to get people in over the holidays because you have more people usually in town before they leave town in a city like Austin. So yeah, you probably don't have quite the need to prepare a month and a half early like you do with auto, but you definitely want to know what your concession range is going to be so you can give your team the authority to say, hey, if we're at this level of occupancy, then let's go ahead and add an extra $1,500. If we're hitting a peak occupancy, then let's go ahead and take that back. So that's kind of the thing that you really want to be thoughtful of over the holiday season. Again, there is going to be a lot more search volume in the middle of November through the end of December than there is in September, October. So definitely spend more during those timeframes for sure. And There is kind of a caveat there, or a variance. We live here in Austin, so we don't get a lot of snow. If you are in, let's say, Minnesota, your seasonal crest, so to speak, in December is going to be a lot smaller. So if you're in, here in Austin, I would say that we expect a pretty good bump in leasing activity middle of November through the end of December, early January. That's probably not the case in Duluth, Minnesota, where it's negative 12 degrees or something like that. So you obviously have to bear that in mind as well.
Yeah. What about common mistakes in multifamily? Do you ever see them with lingering?
Honestly, no, I've never seen it once, so I'm really happy about that. But it's marketing for multifamily is much more simple than it is for power sports or auto dealers, because you typically have 3 to 5 products. So unless your PPC manager is that much of a moron that they're not looking at your 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom incentives, the mistake we see often is that an incentive that was supposed to be taken away by a certain date is not, and then customers are asking about it, and then that's how ownership finds out, and that will blow back on agencies. But luckily, I haven't seen a Christmas tree on an apartment website in June, as I have seen many, many times throughout the automotive industry.
Yeah. Oh, that's certainly good to know. Well, let's also talk specifically thinking about multifamily, about that budget allocation approach. Is there anything different for multifamily that they should think about as they approach?
Yeah, I would actually say that it's the same for auto. Whatever you're spending in July, you should probably spend November, December, and then taper it back down by probably 30% or more January, February, and then start ticking budget up again. March, a little bit more, a bit more in April, May, you're hitting the budget pretty hard. The big mistake to avoid is just having that flat budget. You want to make sure that you have a little extra resources at the end of the year, even if it's as little as $500 approved in marketing spend, that you can throw into your campaigns, because you're going to have more demand during those timeframes. So you just don't want to miss the opportunity, and you can cut back in February where there are just going to be less people moving regardless of where you are in the country.
That makes sense. So it sounds like there's some similarity there in terms of just how they think about budget allocation, but also that kind of after the rush is over too, like kind of similar mindset of making sure that they, keep that value, extend that value, and, think about that as they re-engage people as they go through these different kind of times of the season. Yeah, really good. Very, very good stuff as always, Mike. Let me ask you this part. What role does remarketing, or does remarketing even play a role, or maybe first party data in the maximization of these seasonal campaigns?
Absolutely. I mean, for any business, obviously in auto, multifamily, where we primarily serve, those are our 2 main verticals. First party data is extremely valuable for enhancing your targeting for keywords that might be a little bit vague. For instance, a keyword like apartments near me. We don't know if that person's looking for a luxury apartment or a $500 apartment or something in between. But if you are leveraging your first party data of the tenants you've leased or the cars that you've sold, and you're uploading that into your ad account, it'll give the ad platform more discernment over which of those kind of more ambiguous clicks you should go after and which you should avoid, which is super, super important. So first party data is super important. You want to make sure that at a minimum level, you're doing a quarterly refresh. Definitely want to be doing that right about now for both auto and for multifamily. And then of course for marketing, that's an evergreen strategy. You always want to have marketing running. What I like to do is look at whatever the website, time on site minimum is. Usually it's like 30 seconds to a minute or 2. I'll kind of find something just below the threshold. But what I don't do is remarket to users that have been on the website for 3 seconds, because that's a great way to waste money. And you can spend a lot through remarketing if you don't have impression caps. So we definitely recommend having them in place, like maybe 5 to 7 per day. And then you want to make sure that you're rotating out different types of creative, video creative, HTML5 banner ads. And then, of course, giving a little bit of a creative tweak in November and in December for sure, depending on whatever the incentives are for what you're trying to sell.
Do you have a recommendation for brands when it comes to balancing the like a short-term conversion goal with like long-term like brand awareness,
Yeah.
especially during like seasonal peaks?
Yeah, I mean, every business needs to kind of have an always on brand strategy for sure. A little bit top of funnel community. Obviously, most businesses are doing charity or school events or something kind of local and community focused all year. So those are good things to promote through like social. From a paid media standpoint, you definitely want to make sure that that you're just kind of mindful of what the specials and incentives will be, and that you allocate more budget during those time frames.
Mm-hmm. The last thing I want to ask you for today's episode, Mike, is kind of that one piece of advice that you might want all marketers to have regarding this seasonal kind of PPC time of year. Maybe it's a tactic, a mindset, something that they still have time to try this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would just be really thoughtful about the incentives on the multifamily side. Like, what is the incentive range that we are going to be willing to commit to in advance? Because you don't want that to be a last minute decision where you're trying to get a hold of people and get authorization on December 26th or something like that. So you want to make sure that you kind of have that established. On the automotive side, you just really want to think about like, what do we want our creative to look like? Okay, we don't know what the numbers are going to be. We don't know what the finance incentive is going to be. We don't know what the cash back or rebates are going to be, but we need to know that they will be coming, and we need to have the ads basically ready to go so we can just plug them in and get them live that day. Those are kind of the main things. Obviously, really having a very strong focus on like what is the bid pattern look like for our market. If you're in a market like Dallas, you're going to see major bid escalation. You just want to be really mindful of that so you don't overpay for traffic. The other thing that I also see a lot of businesses doing is they kind of think that their ad schedule should be 24/7 versus kind of more concentrated around business hours. I would say that obviously you have people up later drinking more probably throughout the holidays, but the quality of those leads is definitely not the same as it is for someone calling or searching in the middle of the day. We see a much higher likelihood of conversion when we invest paid media dollars around business hours. And that's even with like markets like Vegas, where we have done a ton of marketing and they have 24/7 BDCs. They get a lot of drunk people calling, get a few sales, but ultimately the cost per sale is substantially higher. So unless you have an infinite budget, you want to be cognizant of where are we most likely to get our conversions from, what times of day, and make sure that you're allocating budget around those times, because that will just intensify around the holidays. One thing I do see a lot of businesses not really preparing for, and I don't know what, someone needs to come out and say like basically form fills are kind of dead. There's if you get 100 form fills, you probably get 800 calls. Calls are the preferred modality for every user right now because nobody wants to end up in another email list. Nobody wants to get information on the seller's terms. So you need to make sure that if you observe that you are getting more calls during certain times of the week or times of day, that you're actually surging resources and making sure that you have people staffed to answer those phone calls and you're calling them back within the day. If you don't call customers back within the day, they're going to move on, and they're going to, in the multifamily sense, they'll perceive that you guys aren't really paying attention. Why would I move to a community that's not even interested in getting new business? On the automotive side, there's just a ton of other options. So if you don't pick up the phone, someone else is going to, and you don't want to miss out on that opportunity.
That is such a fantastic tip to close this episode with. There are just way too many, especially on the auto side. And I love that you bring the differentiation between multifamily and auto. I know that Palm, you guys work very extensively with both of those industries, but I think that, I mean, those are really, really good tips for people to help them understand, how to have success around this time of year. It is definitely a lucrative time of year to do it right.
Absolutely.
But you can also, there are consequences if you don't know what you're doing, and you always drop just the the best receipts on how all this is done. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's something to be said for capability, and Mike and his team at Premier Online Marketing, of course, have that, and it's deep and it's broad. But there's another thing to be said for when you have capability with experience. That becomes the greatest differentiator. And Mike and his team have that as well. It's the reason why you tune in for content like this. It's the reason why Mike can deliver so many very specific concepts, ideas, plans. They've been trusted. He's done them multiple times. His team has been doing this. Handling millions of dollars of spend over many, many years in these verticals. So I thank you again, Mike, for sharing all those great insights. If you haven't checked out Premier Online Marketing, it's easy to do. You can go to their website, premieronlinemarketing.com. It's all spelled the way that those words should be spelled. You can also find them on LinkedIn. So you can look up Premier Online Marketing on LinkedIn, where you will also, and I say this all the time, look at all the people that work there. And if you're not connected with Mike and Claire and the whole team, Andreas, like you've got people out there who are absolutely ones that you need in your network. So make sure you check that out. And before you know it, we'll see you right back here on the podcast. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, John.